Well, I wanted to make an enclosure for the open metal stand on my 1938 drum sander. I had previously upgraded from an old Jet 1632 to this Laguna Supermax 1938. It's got a really nice capacity. The only thing I wished for was some enclosed storage for that lower shelf. So I'll show you the process on how I did that step by step, and it worked out really nice. I was tempted to put this sander on the enclosed base that normally comes with the 2550 drum sander, but apparently in that configuration you can't lower the tables, and that was a deal breaker for me, so I had to figure out how to enclose the base myself. Now, as you can imagine, there's a bit of wrangling to get that back plywood panel inside the frame of the sander, and to do that you actually have to drop out the lower shelf. It's no big deal, it's just 8 short length carriage bolts. But before you release the carriage bolts, I would recommend adding a ratchet strap. Not tight or anything, but just to prevent those legs from splaying at all. And that panel that you'll need for the back of the sander cart is 36.5 inches long. This is just made from 1/2 inch plywood. It's got a 9.5 degree bevel on top and bottom, and measuring from long to short, it's 20 9/16. You'll also need to notch the back panel at the top. Both top corners get notched, and that's just to create a little clearance for the carriage bolts from the stand that we're not going to remove. Now, you could just as easily drill holes to create clearance for those carriage bolts, but if you want to notch it the same way I did, I'll put dimensions for that notch at the end of the video. Okay, with our notches cut, let's see if we can fit that in place, and if it looks good, we'll go ahead and prime it and paint it and get it installed. Okay, so that looks like that's going to fully enclose the back side of the stand with no gaps, so I'm happy with that. So at this point, I have the side panels rough cut to fit in, but now I need to remove a 1/2 inch of material to account for that back panel. I think I'll just use that same notching jig to mark the material that needs to be removed from the side panels, again, just to make clearance for the carriage bolts. At this point, the rough dimensions of this angled side panel are 10 3/8 wide at the top and 17 7/8 at the bottom. There's no angled cuts top and bottom, these are just square, and the height on that is 20 5/16. Then I'll mark the panels left and right and remove that 1/2 inch strip from just the back edge of both panels. Well, my goal here is just a friction fit. Things will be reinforced in a minute with pocket hole screws, but that looks good. I'm happy with that. Everything's covered, no gaps, and so we'll just leave this ratcheting strap on for now to stabilize the legs, because after all, that lower shelf has to drop down one more time to get the rear panel out, but just one more install after painting and we should have 3 sides done. As I go, I'll mention my favorite tools in the shop, and this Jessam stock guide is definitely one of them. I've added some mag switches there so it stays on a plywood rail. Just drop that in, lock in the 150 pound magnets, and as long as your guides are set to whatever stock you're using, they really work nice. Now, when I picked these up, I thought it might be a 50-50, whether they were just kind of a gimmick or whether they were useful. And right now I'm ripping the top for our little enclosure here, and it's 10.5 inches wide. So a panel like that, you could definitely get a featherboard alongside, but sometimes when you're ripping sheet good, there's no room for a featherboard, and that's where these are really helpful. And I'll just trim that to a 36.5 inch length to complete that top panel. And for the most part, the notching jig was accurate for the top panel as well, although I found it easiest to insert the shelf if these corners were knocked off, so it kind of looked like that. So the order of operation really works best one way to install it. Back panel goes in first, then the top panel. Then you can basically just fold up the side panels to support that. And that really is nice if you can just kind of build that for a friction fit. And that right side of the drum is really the only reason you need to enclose the top at all, but that'll keep dust out and I think be a better solution. And looking at the big picture here, I think I've got the storage on the wrong side, so I'm going to flip the panels around so I can access my sandpaper and goodies from the front side. Okay, looks like everything fits just the same that way as expected. Now basically the entire inside of the cart will be enclosed except for those areas that we knocked off to make room for the bolts. Just wanted to check before I got too far along. Just remember that if you trimmed your side panels like I did, there will be a left and a right. Well, if you're enjoying the process so far, consider becoming a subscriber to The Thoughtful Woodworker for more shop projects just like this. Okay, so the project's just about done. We just have to make some rails for the sliding doors. And if you've ever made sliding doors, you know that the upper rail needs to be a little bit thicker just to accommodate the door being lifted up to install it and dropping into that lower track. But 35.5 is our overall working length, so we'll cut those at a slight bevel on the front so they're matching width. Here I've got the blade tilted to 9.5 degrees to match the shape of our cart. Now this will be the top rail and it's made out of 1-inch thick white oak just because that's what I had on hand, but you could certainly glue strips together if you don't have thick stock. And I think I'll run the same bevel along the edge of that. With the blade still beveled over to 9.5 degrees, I'll swap over to a 1/4-inch dado stack. That should be perfect because I'm using 1/4-inch plywood for the sliding doors, so that should give us a somewhat loose fit that you'd want in this application. Today I'm using this saw stop dado. It's kind of my second choice in the shop. I have my main one set up on another table saw right now. Normally what I go with is the Infinity Datonator XL, another really nice set. So I'll drop links to a handful of my favorite tools down in the description box. Now if you don't have a dado blade yet, you could certainly make these grooves with just a full kerf blade, just making slight adjustments to the rip fence between passes. I made a sample groove in an offcut just to confirm that I like the spacing and the way that 1/4-inch plywood slides in the track. Everything looked good, so we'll move on to the real thing. This will be the top track that's a little bit thicker, so the blade depth will be just a little over 1/2 inch. Now I just moved the rip fence over to make that second groove, and here I've got support on both sides of the blade, so I feel a little better about this cut. So that's what the top track will look like. 2 1/4-inch grooves with about a 5/16 spacing in between, and it's set maybe 3/8 of an inch off the front, so that'll give us a nice sturdy track. All we have to do there is just cut that one to length and repeat the process for the lower track. Only difference there, the depth of the groove only needs to be about a 1/4 inch for the bottom track. Good. And 5/16 of an inch between the two grooves just to match the other track. Looks good there. So the grooves align in the top and bottom tracks and everything's at the right angle, so I think we're ready to trim to length and install them. Now the bottom track fits in fine, but this top track is going to need a couple of relief holes drilled just for a bolt that interferes with it. About 2 1/8 inch in, I need to drill a Fosner hole, about 1/2 inch deep will do it. And then just a few recessed holes to mount this track. We can actually screw it right into the plywood top of our enclosure. Okay, so after a quick test fitting, I realized that there's no plywood in this corner for the top panel, so you could probably skip that one. Just give yourself 4. Start maybe 6 or 8 inches inboard, a couple towards the center, and 1 towards the other side, but nothing on the end. And then for sizing the plywood doors, again, these are just 1/4 inch plywood panels, nothing fancy. And they'll be about 20 inch wide to start. I'll see how I like the look there. Whereas the height will be 19 1/4. That'll leave me a 1/4 inch to go into the bottom track, as well as a 1/4 inch for that top track. So pretty simple to drop those in. Just go in the upper track first, find your slot and then drop it down into the lower track. Yep, and those slide nice and easy. So I guess we just need to figure out what kind of a handhole we want on these doors. And you can go as crazy as you want with that. I think this one might be a little bit oversized for what I need here. Some people might just drill a hole and, you know, ease the edge a little bit. That would be fine. I think I'll use these narrower slots, maybe just one of those, and slightly angle it to match the inside angle of the leg set. So here's another notable tool. This is the 620. It's completely cordless and has really good dust collection. So we'll use that along with the guide bushing to rough out these openings. There we go, nice cutout. I really like the way that one cuts. Been happy with it so far. All right, to slip those in place, just start at the top all the way up and then drop it down in the track. And after using this a little bit, I gotta say I'm not a fan of how this works, and the problem could be several reasons, but for one, the 1/4" plywood is not terribly flat and it's really lightweight. Another issue may be that I drilled these handles off center, and so that tends to create this kind of racking moment here that can actually start to jump the panel out of the track, and so I don't like that. I think I'm going to start over with 1/2" panels, something a little thicker. I'll still use these same rails and just rabbet a ledge to fit. And there's one other issue working against me. I think I cut these a little bit too short. Basically, as you install that, it should just fit with no extra, and I'm about 1/8 of an inch off the rail, so I think that kind of adds to the sloppy feeling of these doors. So this is that Daynator XL that I wanted to use earlier. I keep this pretty much permanently set up on my smaller Fusion table saw, and it just helps me avoid switching back and forth so much between a standard blade and a dado blade. Basically, we just need to cut a rabbet on the top and bottom. Now the top will need to be about 1/2 inch wide, and on this bottom side the rabbet is just about 1/4 inch wide. All right, let's give those a try. Oh yeah, right away I can tell that's going to be much better. Just has a more substantial feel. I like that the doors lay right together now, so I'm glad that I left that 5/16 between the panels. That worked out well. I think on the handles, I'll definitely make that centered on the height of the panel. And you know, instead of a through hole, I'm just going to do a slight recess. Boy, that carpet tape gets a good hold. So that's what it looks like, just with a 3/16 or 1/4 deep recess. I think that'll work just fine. Then we just need a couple of pocket holes in the side panels, maybe a pair on the back side and a couple at the top, and that should secure things nicely. Just remember to set your Craig Foreman or whatever jig you're using for 1/2 inch material. You can typically do that with 3/4 inch or 1 inch long screws. I've kind of backed the setting off to start further back to accommodate 1 inch screws, and that looks like it'll work well. So I'm going to be spraying with the D6 today and a Fuji T70 gun. I'm also using the PPS system that has a filter built in, and we'll start with some primer. Well, normally I wouldn't spray outside, but there's no wind out, and this just sounds better than setting up my whole spray booth today. I'm not sure why this cabinet paint always looks orange peeled when it's wet, but you know, when it dries, it's just smooth as glass. And that's an emerald urethane trim enamel paint in a Roycroft pewter if you're interested in matching up that same color. And there it is, 2848 Roycroft pewter. It's a nice color. And it just happens to match my shop cabinets too. You might have to loosen that lower shelf slightly to get that rear panel back in, but it should pop right in place. Next I have the top panel, and on the underside of that I've left a little strip without any paint just in case I want to glue that upper rail in place. Then you should be able to flip your side panels up in place. Yeah, it's going to work nice. And the other side panel will come up just the same. The upper track goes in with 1¼ inch screws, and glue is optional. And that lower rail just snaps down in place, and we'll secure that with 3 self-tapping screws. That's not going anywhere. Make sure your panels are pushed all the way to the outside. You can add those pocket hole screws. 2 on the back and 2 on the top for each side. This panel on the right wasn't fully flush with the outside of the metal frame, so I just used a spreader to clamp it where I want it before screwing it in place. And that looks good. I like it. Last 2 screws up top. And if you want to go absolutely crazy with it, you can add a 5/16 carriage bolt through an existing hole in the front legs. And a little bit of paste wax on the door and track might just help things slide a little better. The wider groove goes to the top, and I think I'll put this left panel towards the rear, because this right side is where I'll typically access my sandpaper. Just lift it all the way up, and you should be able to drop that down into the rear groove. Yeah. And same thing for the right door. Drop it in. That's already sliding nice. Perfect. Remember to replace any bolts for the lower shelf if you remove those, and you can go ahead and release that strap that we were using temporarily and put your cart into service. I even put a couple of cabinet door bumpers under the folding tables to give a nice soft landing anywhere it might contact the stand. And my favorite part just might be that I can sneak in there and grab new sandpaper whether the tables are up or down. Well, if you've seen any good tools along the way, be sure to drop down to the description box. I've linked up to several of my favorite tools there. They're worth a look. So I wanted to give you dimensions for that notch on the back panel of the sander cart. And for that, you want to come over roughly 3 3/8 here. Vertically, you want to come down about 2 1/8. And on that sidewall, come in to start your notch about 1 1/8 inch and come down about 1/2 inch. Then just connect the dots there. That'll give you enough clearance for those carriage bolts. Now, of course, this assumes that you're going to use a 1/2 inch panel on the top like I did. That's going to be good. That's going to be real good. I love it.